Let's start with energy in food webs. First of all, we will briefly run through what you should already know about food chains. In a nutshell, food chains show in any particular habitat what is eaten by what. Now, this fish tank represents a typical habitat, a rather murky garden pond, but still teeming with organisms. And one food chain here could start with waterweed, which is eaten by tadpoles, which in turn would be eaten by larger carnivores, water beetles and fish, such as minnows. You should remember, in a food chain, the arrows always go from food to feeder. So in this case, from waterweed to tadpoles to minnows. Now, in a test, you will often get diagrams like this. Basically, the food chain has become a lot more complicated, and this is now called a food web. The same principle applies. The arrows go from food to feeder, but here we've added water beetles, perch, then pike, and top carnivores, otters. These arrows also represent the direction of energy flow through a habitat. And as you go up a particular food chain, the number of organisms decreases. Looking at another food chain, we start with leaves that are eaten by caterpillars, then woodpeckers, and finally, the top carnivore is a kestrel. As you go up a food chain, the number of organisms usually decreases. This is because so little of the energy is transferred from one organism to another. However, if the producer is very large and supports very small primary consumers, for example an oak tree being eaten by hundreds of caterpillars, the pyramid of numbers may have an unusual shape.
But how much is passed on? Well, if we use this spot of sunlight to represent the sun's light energy shining on a green plant, how much does the plant manage to convert to stored food energy? 66%, 33%. In fact, this much, 0.2%. Only 1/500th of the sun's light energy is transferred to the start of a food chain.
So if all the energy that's stored in the plant and is available to the animals that eat it is represented by this light, how much is transferred to that animal? 90%? 50%? No, the amount of energy transferred to the animals is around 10%.
But what happens to the 90% that isn't? Well, it's not available to the food chain because it's the energy the plant needs each and every day to survive. And it's the energy that drives all the reactions to make new cells, which in turn produces leaves, flowers, and seeds. In fact, all levels of the food chain only transfer 10% of the energy they receive onto the next level.
So 90% of energy is lost from food chains, but it does keep everything alive. Here are some facts about food chains you really need to know well in order to answer test questions. Remember, for food chains, the arrows always go from food to feeder, not the other way round. The arrows also represent the energy flow along a food chain, and the amount of usable energy decreases as we go up a food chain. Because the energy transfer is very inefficient, the number of organisms it can support decreases as you go along a food chain. The energy in any food chain originally comes from the sun and is converted into biomass or living matter by photosynthesis. To sum up this section, feeding relationships in a particular habitat can be summarized using a food web. Okay, if you weren't sure of anything, rewind the tape and go over the key points again.